Okay, yeah, my name is Barb, and I'm running the bake oven today. And I'm still in the practice phase. Everybody is always kind of learning something new.
Sure.
And so I've done a few episodes of baking, but with a different oven. I worked with a smaller clay oven.
Okay.
And so now I'm transferring that experience here, but a lot of the experience is the same. So you have to, well, first thing, you have to plan what your food is going to be, because you're going to be preheating your oven, and this one's very large, so about probably 2 to 3 hours to heat it. And that's if you're going to be using the stored heat in the bricks. So there's a couple of different ways to use this oven. You can preheat it for a couple of hours, let it burn down to ashes, and then you would use a tool here. And you can use this to kind of scrape the ashes out. Actually, I've got a better tool than this.
Scrape them out or just stir them up?
Yeah, this is more for pushing around the pieces of wood.
Okay.
And you can pull a few embers, but if you're going to scrape out the ashes, then you use, I think this is a rake. And I would reach in there, pull the ashes forward, past the doorway, and then there's a hole right there.
Ah,
And then
convenient.
the ashes kind of dump out here, or dump down there, and then you can pull them all the way out at the end to be disposed of. And so then what you would do is, it's been preheated, you would put the oven door on. And this thing is massive. It's like
Yeah.
really heavy. And so it's like wood and a piece of metal there. And you put this on the front of the oven, and that will allow the temperatures to sort of kind of level out. Yes.
Okay.
And then you have to have your food all ready. So if you think about 2-hour preheating, and then as soon as it's preheated, you have to put your food in. That means that before you preheat your oven, you have to have your pies ready. You have to have your bread kind of risen and ready to go into the oven, because you're going to put it in a series of kind of food. So the first food that you can put in is like pies. They take a higher temperature, and you'd put those in toward the back. Now that's without a fire going inside of there.
So how hot does it get?
It,
Just
you know,
what, 350, 400?
yeah, 400, 500.
Oh, wow.
Now, if it's 500, you're going to burn your food. And so they have a way to test. You can take like a little bit of flour, throw it in on the floor of the oven. If it bursts into flames, that tells you that it's way too hot.
Too hot, okay.
If it burns immediately, it's still too hot. If it takes maybe 5 seconds or so, bread. If it takes 5 seconds and it sort of browns, that means it's kind of the perfect temperature. And so then you would load your bread in there, and usually I throw cornmeal down onto the floor of the oven so the bread doesn't stick. You put the oven door on, and it's about 30 minutes or so. Now keep in mind that you don't have any heat source in there other than like the heated bricks. So every time you open that oven door, you're letting heat out. And so if you start smelling the bread, it's good to check. You can see how it's progressing, but you don't want to keep, kind of opening it up all over and over. Now, some of the people who have used this oven before, they said that the technique they use is to push the fire to the back and then keep feeding the fire. And so you do not put the oven door on, because if you do, you will block the air from getting to it. I have to move around my logs. The fire is dying down, probably because I added a large log. And so this is perfect for doing that. So hopefully I'll just move stuff around. See how that goes. Oh. There, I'll let it sit there for a little bit. So I can tell that there's a problem with the fire right now because there's a lot of smoke. And if it's burning well, you're not going to get as much smoke. I can, if it still doesn't take off, I have some smaller pieces of wood over there that I can throw in there, and it'll add a little kind of quick heat, and that might be enough to get the large log started. Sometimes it's better to have smaller logs to work with. They catch easier, they burn a little bit better, but you know, you have to, when you're baking with an oven and firewood, you have to kind of learn what it takes to use the wood that you have. So I have a mixed bread, so they're whole wheat, and so they're just rising right now, waiting until I feel that it's proper time to stick them in. And then there's some that have been partially baked that I'm supposed to put in.
It's kind of like the Indian pot bread.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's it might be Sally Lunn.
Okay.
So the simplest bread recipe you can have is flour, water, salt, and yeast, and that's bread. And so if you have extra things like eggs, you can add eggs into it. If you have sugar, you can add sugar, so you can change the flavor of the bread. If you add butter, then it's the best bread in the world, right? Because anything you put in butter or butter on top always tastes great. Now, how is the bread rising? So in the 18th century, you're not going to go to the store and buy little packets of the dry yeast like we do. Instead, you'll go to your brewery, or if you're brewing beer, you go and you take the barm off of the beer. And the barm is like the frothy, yeasty bubbles up at the top. So we don't have a brewery here, so I'm doing the next best thing. I have some homemade barm here. You're welcome to look at it. It's ale-based. And so I threw some sugar in there.
Like, what is it, the sourdough starter?
Yeah, it would be similar to sourdough starter. And so what you can do is you can keep that yeast going by feeding it sugar or flour or a mixture.
I've never been successful at keeping my sourdough starter going.
So this is, I got a can of ale, and then you mix in yeast, and then you have to feed it. So it's just like feeding a sourdough starter. The other thing you can do is you can go to a brewery and ask for brewer's yeast. Okay. And for a brewery, the brewer's yeast is a kind of a waste byproduct. And so the last time that I went, they gave me a quart and a half.
Oh,
And
wow.
they said if I wanted to come back with a 5-gallon bucket, they would give me 5 gallons of yeast.
Wow.
And it was amazing stuff.
Okay.
And so that's how they did the breads. Now, if you're doing cakes, they had other ways of, if you didn't want to use yeast, like in a cake, you could beat your eggs for 30 minutes, and that will incorporate air bubbles into it. And
That's why they're so strong.
right, yeah. So it's similar, like if you've seen some modern day waffle recipes where you divide the egg yolks from egg whites, and then you kind of mix up the egg yolk with the batter, and then you beat the whites separately and fold it in, and it's nice and fluffy. And so that's similar to kind of the an older technique.
Yeah, I have a mixer to do.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Okay.
And let's see, this lovely piece of wood, actually it's not too heavy. It's actually really light. We had a tree that fell down nearby, and our carpenter here carved a hole in it. So this is a dough bowl. So there were dough bowls that were really large because families were making a lot of bread, and certainly kind of in a fort like this, all the soldiers are going to get a bread ration or flour ration. And so what I would do, I think my recipe is I take some of the barm, and I'm going to add just some water here. And I had like little dry pieces of flour from my first bread there. And then I can use this, put it into my flour.
You can smell it.
Yeah.
It does.
Oops. So, and there were different ways of preserving your yeast. Like, let's say you were living somewhere where you couldn't get to the brewery all the time. Or maybe your neighbor was brewing beer and you just couldn't go there all the time. You could make a kind of a concoction of, I think it was flour and water, and you cook it, and it may have had some sugar in it, and it was sort of like a base to put your yeast in. And once you dump your yeast in, it starts bubbling away. And after the bubbling dies down, then you can bottle it or put it into a crock. And I was working at a different historic site, and I had it in a bottle with a wire cap kind of shut down, and it built up pressure. And so when I opened it up the next day in front of a group of students, it just exploded out of the bottle. I called it a yeast geyser. It went up and it hit the canvas tent above my head.
Wow.
And I was shocked because I didn't think it was, building up that much pressure, because it had done most of that early. I've got to deal with my oven because it is, it's just smoky. I was trying to make my breakfast, but it didn't work. Whoa! A few dangerous tools over here. There we go. Let's see. Yeah, so I think the problem was that this last piece of wood I put on. So I'm going to see if I can get some flames. So I'm going to get a smaller piece. I'll throw these in there. So I'll let that sit for a little bit and see if it hopefully comes back. But it's dying down, there's too much smoke, so I'm going to have to spend a little bit more time kind of paying attention to the fire. And it's that easy for the fire to kind of go out. And I don't know exactly why it went out. And so that's the oven that I baked with there is smaller, and we also were working with like smaller pieces of wood. So it's all a learning experience, kind of seeing what it takes to keep everything going. And so another loaf of bread, right? And you just keep kind of making stuff. I don't know if you noticed, I had a couple of sweet potatoes inside of the oven.
I noticed.
Oh, you noticed that? Okay. So why do you think I would have sweet potatoes in my oven? Well, I am baking, but I'm baking them for a reason, besides just eating them the way that they are.
I have an idea. Can you guess? Where might she want something warm? I don't know. Something warm, but not too hot. Because will that go right into the oven just like that? What do you see me do? I do it, and in the summertime I'll take it out on the back porch. With the big bowl.
Yeah, all that
So it has to rise,
Yeah.
right? Or let it proof.
Yes.
Yep.
So, is that what you're going to do with it? You put it under the bowls or near
No,
the heat?
it's actually going to be part of a recipe.
Oh, see, I was
So,
wrong.
you see,
I
It's
was
not-
expecting it would be part of the recipe.
yeah,
Oh, see,
so-
you were right.
Yeah, and so you can turn sweet potatoes after they're cooked into bread, and you can make nice little and they're very, very tasty.
You would like sweet potato buns.
Recipe that I have. Yeah.
I love sweet potatoes.
I think I missed on the water amount.
I never made it with
But we've heard of it.
3.5 cups to 1 bowl.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, because